I'm humbly going to share some stories and some of the realizations I've made, some of the changes that I am in the process of making. And it's a work in progress, but happily a work in progress, not a wistful, oh, I'm still working on it, but an embracing, oh, I'm glad I'm learning, I'm glad I'm growing. And I'm grateful for this opportunity, Judy and the Meditation Center and you for showing up tonight, because it's forced me to trace this journey and that's helpful, right? There's not many opportunities for us to look back, and knowing that you have to speak to people about it has really made me or created an opportunity for me to sit down and really look at, hey, how did I get here? How did this happen? So, because one of my realizations is that no one sets out to be a people pleaser, right? No one says, hey, I'm going to please all of the people all of the time. What happens is we're all trying to make our way in the world, right? We're all trying to, have our needs met in different ways. And for me, my early life experiences, perhaps in other things, led me to have a very deep longing for security and stability in my life. And when you're looking for something, you're searching, right? And especially when you're very young, the answer that you come up with in the moment may work, but it's not always the right answer. So when I was very young, because I longed for security and stability, when I was a child on the playground, if people were fighting, I was often the peacekeeper. It was a wonderful thing. I would try and, build bridges between people, and oftentimes that would work, not always. And it was different outside of the home than in my home. My mom would definitely not say I was a bridge builder at home. But you look at sort of that thing that starts very young, and then again, it starts as a positive. But then over time, you do it over and over again. And instead of being a peacekeeper, I started being a person with an overdeveloped sense of responsibility, and a sense of myself as being a solution to problems. And there's a number of things that aren't quite great in there, which I'll unpack as we go through. But so what started off as, trying to help negotiate or mediate issues on the playground ended up with me at, I'd say probably 10 or 11, thinking that I could actually counsel my parents on problems they were having with my older sister. And they listened. They actually listened. I was so convinced of my ability. But what that leads to is a really overdeveloped sense of responsibility, right? A sense of myself being the answer to problems, the solution to problems. And so it's just one way for me to look at something that started as a positive, but then over time really became something else. So that's really what I'm going to unpack a little bit more tonight. And that's how my search for peace and security and stability just ended up giving me some unintended consequences. So, and this coping strategy. So I'll just start with, and at any point, feel free to ask questions, because it's going to be a lot of my voice. And I'd love to be able to stop and hear from one of you. So don't be shy. So, if many of you will have taken the Introduction to Meditation course, and even if you hadn't, you know that we always start with thoughts. So, the thoughts that I had were things like, I need to keep the peace, or keeping the peace, even something as simple as keeping the peace is important to me. Or if I had a thought that was difficult or an idea that was difficult, don't rock the boat. Oh, this person wants such and such, so let's do that. A horrible avoidance of saying no. Like the idea of actually saying no was really, really difficult. And those thoughts, we know what happens, repeated over time, became really serious patterns of action, patterns of belief, and ways of being that made it among other things, extremely difficult for me to tolerate other people's discomfort. Almost impossible for me to do something that made other people really feel uncomfortable. And I'll show you what that meant in some of my different situations. So in my early intimate relationships, I won't get into too much detail, but I'll just say that I basically turned myself into a pretzel. I was very good at scanning and seeing what was wanted, what was appreciated, what was valued, and molding to that. And that led to being, fearful of sharing my inner feelings and hiding any feelings of discomfort. So, for instance, being in a situation, you're having a conversation and someone says something inappropriate, and you can imagine how in today's environment, right, this is part of where the idea of being anti-racist comes from, right? If someone says something that is inappropriate, do I shy away from it? Well, I definitely would have shied away from it, years ago. And that puts you in a very vulnerable, and in some cases, it could put you in a potentially dangerous situation if you're, facing something that is, that internally is wrong, and yet you are so fearful of speaking up that you don't. So anyway, what happens when you're having all these feelings that you don't share? Push them down, push. Well, eventually they start to come out, right? So lots of silence punctuated by like eruptions of big emotions because you're hiding things. And then of course, you go from those early intimate relationships into marriage, and you add kids into the mix. And, what was really easy to be like, happy-go-lucky, well, once you start to add some additional pressure in, the challenge to smooth things over becomes far more difficult, right? It's like you're making a cement sidewalk and someone keeps stepping in it and you're like, ooh, try to smooth it over becomes more and more difficult. So for instance, some of the things that I would do, and, some folks on this call will know that I've done this, but things like, husband's been working all week, I'm going to take the kids on the weekend, like I'll get them out of the way so that, he doesn't have to worry about it. Like basically just looking for things that I could do to keep discord to a minimum. And then, as you do more and more of that, resentment can start to grow. So the more I did to sort of lessen the burden, the more resentment happened. So I've become very aware over the years how like people pleasing is this very internal system, right? It's a completely self-fulfilling system. I see something, I think I know how to respond, I respond, it's that cycle. There's no way out, and there's no external inputs to it. So you're never checking against another's truth. You're never checking against your deeper truths. You're just constantly reacting to what you think is going on. So it's basically like this big factory of waste thinking that creates the thoughts, responds to them, creates the thoughts, responds to them. And you know what it's like when you're in a self-fulfilling prophecy? It feels very real, right? Because, well, you're creating it. That's why it feels real, because it's of your own creation. So one of the things that I started realizing is that, as I started to unpack this piece by piece by piece, is that I've been very cut off, that this people pleasing has actually cut me off from myself and from other people. So interesting, right? The thing that you're doing to try to keep people happy, to try and keep connected with people, to try and build deeper connections is actually doing the exact opposite. And that is like 10 years of knowledge right there. Boom, at least, probably 15. Over the years now, I've realized like that I hadn't been sharing myself honestly, that I was doing more and more to make other people supposedly happy, but was based on nothing but my own inferences. And that in the meantime, while I was building all these things to do, I was also slowly building this resentment, right? Doing, very busy, resentment, 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 really bad combo. And then there was lots of internal judgment going on too, because of course I wasn't expressing any truth, right? So it's just this big internal buildup, kind of like a furnace. So I'll just talk a little bit about sort of the impact on friendships and work, and then I'm going to just talk about, so how did I disrupt this system? And really it was many, many little steps. But in terms of friendships, you know, looking for security and stability meant looking for common ground and for deeper connection. But a connection built on constant yeses is not a true connection, right? It's not, by not allowing discord or disagreement or challenge, talking myself into doing and saying things, I had a real lack of faith in the strength of the connections I was building with other people. I had a lack of faith in those other people. I had a lack in my own faith, a lack of faith in myself to manage difficulty, and a lack of faith in the resilience of the friendship itself, and thinking that they couldn't be tested by hardship, or thinking that somehow speaking my truth would break something that was important to me. And so I, again, you know, and small things just build up and build up, you know, were nowhere near as big as I thought they were. But it led me to not be a good friend to other people, right? Because friends are honest in a caring, sorry, this is Charlie, for those of you who haven't met Charlie before, she loves to be on the computer with me. You know, true friends are people that you want to be truly honest with in a loving way. I'm not talking about carelessness, not at all. Very intentional, caring, and not sort of, you need to know this. No, no, no. It's, I need to say this because this relationship matters to me. And so I may not know how to say it just right, but I'm going to say it. I'm going to speak in a truthful way in the hopes of connecting truthfully from my core to yours. So the other thing that happened is that, especially early on in friendships, I always felt like I was somehow, other people were more powerful than me because I was always giving them the decision-making ability, and I was somehow beholden. So, you know, those are some of the, I guess, unintended consequences again. And then the last thing I'll talk about is a bit about work. There you go, sweetie. So if in all of your major relationships, you're acting a certain way to please people, then of course you do the same thing at the office, which I would often do. And, you know, I remember had a boss who was a great visionary, and it was quite anxiety provoking because he was one of those big vision people, and I'm a doer. And instead of being super comfortable with the fact that I'm a doer, I kept like trying to act like someone I wasn't. And it created a lot of anxiety. And the more anxiety I had, the more fearful I became. And the less able I was to say no. And I remember like this penultimate moment is me trudging through a snowstorm with my 2 kids in tow on a cell phone, trying to conduct a meeting. My boss was in Ottawa, trying to conduct a meeting because I couldn't say that I couldn't go to the meeting, right? Like it wasn't within my reach to say, there's been a snowstorm here, my car is encased in ice, my kids had an appointment. Anyway, it just, like, I just remember thinking, what am I doing? How have I gotten into this situation? But basically what I had done over many years is I'd put myself I'd like had all of these false expectations, and I was being crushed by them. I was being crushed by these competing demands and expectations that I was putting on myself. I abandoned a number of friendships due to this internal pressure that I was feeling. And I honestly lost connection with my true self after many, many years of ignoring my own inner voice. So, you know, it's the kind of thing, when I say that, I mean, someone calls you up and says, hey, can you? And my immediate response is, oh, no, I can't do that. Or, okay, I can't do that. Oh, yes, you can. Or I can't do that, but then figure out how you can anyway. So it's like this constant pushing down of the inner voice. So that's all the backstory, okay? So what I'll say now is that what I've learned after 10, 15, I guess a lot of years, because I'm more than 15 years old, you probably know that, is that being a people pleaser pleases no one. No one is pleased by a people pleaser. I am not pleased. People are not pleased by people pleasers. And you know, the hardest part of this journey has been not recounting the things done. It's the cost of the things that I've done, right? And the great thing is that self-respect means that I can look at those things in the face with not an ounce of judgment. I can look at them and say, yep, that's what I did. I did that because I felt like that's what I needed to do to get my needs met as a child, as a young adult. And oops, it became a really great pattern. And even as a grown adult, a mature adult, I didn't realize the pattern that I'd gotten into. So I know that, for instance, in my marriage, that being a people pleaser and taking care of everything, trying to take care of everything, has really robbed me of many years of having a true partner, right? Because you can't be a true partner if someone's always trying to carry more than you. It's very annoying, right? That doesn't feel so good. So, I'm making changes in that respect. Another thing is that, doing all the kid stuff, well, that kept my partner from being able to be an expert with the kids in the same way that I am, right? So there's a cost to all this doing, all this supposed pleasing. I already mentioned some of the costs in my friendships, but with the knowledge I have now, I'm trying to build more mutual trust and respect, share more openly, with a lot of love, again, with a lot of love for myself, trying to have a lot more authenticity, and so that I don't feel like, do people really know who I am? So that's all the back stuff. When I think about self-respect, it's a term that I really first started to understand when I started meditating. And I remember we had a Christmas party, Judy, you'll remember this, that we called Elf Respect. And I loved that. And, but the meditation practice has helped me sit a little taller in myself. And I think that what's happened over the past 10 years has been this slow returning back to who I am, who I really am. And I'm still doing this. I'm still walking back inside to me. But that is where my stability and security comes from now. And so when I feel lost, because I do feel lost many times a day sometimes, what I look to is my inner compass. And it's not about pleasing, it's about knowing. Right? So there's no effort to make something happen. There's no effort to make a person feel a certain way. There's not even an effort on an outcome. There's an effort on being in a place where I feel like I've been true to myself, and where I'm acting from a place of truth. and acting from a place of stability and security inside of myself, not the imagined paths or preferences of others, right? And that imagined piece is underlined several times because that's really what those paths have been, is imagined, not checked. So trying to really follow that inner compass, live that on a daily basis and build stability from the inside out. So not so much based on the people upstairs in my household or the people in my office, what they're thinking, how they're feeling. It's a work in progress, right? So I don't want to make it sound like I have all the answers, because I don't. But I have a lot of experience. I have a lot of lived experience in this area. I'm continuing to have a lot of lived experience in this area. Instead of wallpapering over my voice now, I listen to it. I make room to hear that. I notice times when I have squeezed myself too much to try and respond to what I perceive to be the needs and wants of others. Yeah, I already talked about seeing myself with a lot more clarity, but also just with a lot more love. And trying to have less judgment for myself has meant having less judgment around others as well. And then the other thing that I want to mention is that I feel like, I said seeing myself with more clarity. I feel like it's less self now. There's less, I know it's self-respect. I know that, but there's less self and more spirit. So it's less a focus on me and what I'm doing and what I can do, and more a focus on, spiritual core, spiritual power, divine power. I'm super comfortable with the word God. Not everyone is, but I'm really comfortable with that. But that spiritual piece for me has been really life-changing, because it's not just about me anymore, right? So I don't have all the responsibility, and that's been really, really big. Not feeling like I am responsible for others' happiness, others' actions. It's not my job to make everything okay, but I can be a peaceful presence in the midst of everything that's going on, right? That's a very big difference from being, trying to please, trying to be peace. So, what else? A couple more things. I feel like also self-respect, one of the really exciting things about having more self-respect is that I am getting less defensive about criticism. Not completely, but I am getting less defensive about criticism. And my kids are really trying, and they're testing that all the time and say, hey, does that still bother you? And so they're good testers on an ongoing basis. But I am more open to criticism. I am more open to being flawed, and that being okay. And it's interesting because being more determined about that has actually made me more cooperative too. Yeah, which is an interesting sort of byproduct of, I guess it's because I don't feel like I need to defend my turf as much, that I can just sort of, yeah. So, and the other thing that I would say, and we talked about this when I was at the library when we were doing this, is that I've started having more difficult conversations, and walking towards difficult conversations and rather than away from them. I have been known to say a couple of times that, if the relationship matters, say something, right? Because all the years where I haven't said anything, I've actually seen how that's harmed relationships. And so now I really I steel myself and am determined that if it is bothering me and upsetting, that there's no harm in sharing it, right? And not in a it's your fault kind of way or putting it on the other person. No. But in a just in a really genuine, like open, honest, loving way. And I'm hoping that that invites the same from others. And yeah, so um, yeah. And I think the other thing I would say is that I'm also seeing times where I really overblow the role that I play in a situation. So that's the other thing is people pleasers, like, they think they make it sound like it's all about you, but really it's all about us at the very basis of it, right? People pleasers we're trying to get our needs met, and seeing myself at like the center of situations, and that has really definitely changed. Um, so I think that when I think about self-respect now, I think about how I have the courage, or I'm trying to constantly build the courage to face situations and act. So see it and do what needs doing, to care for myself and for others, and to stay connected to myself and to my spiritual center, so that that compass is inside and not outside. So, so yeah.
So let's just have a moment of silence, can we?
Oh,
I just feel like that was such an honor to listen to you speak so honestly, Anne Marie. I just feel like we were given the gift of this beautiful little flower and we just watched it open petal at a time in front of us in the most delicate way. And I watched Skana's face from time to time, and I thought, oh, and you've got like one of your dearest friends here with you listening to that with such love and such care. So the honesty and the courage and it's just such beauty listening to you speak. So thank you for the gift of you that you just gave us. It's very beautiful. So maybe we'll just have a moment of silence and we just hold the beauty of you and that sharing. And then I have a couple questions, and I think maybe some others might too, but let's yeah, surround you with love and appreciation. I feel like the proof is in the pudding in a way. Like the fact that you could actually sit here and tell us all of that is evidence of your self respect. I mean, I can't even imagine a year ago you doing this. That's phenomenal. It's really, I mean, does it feel that way for you?
well, it feels a little funny, because it's so intensely personal. Like it really is, and I hope that, I don't know. I guess I'm glad for the opportunity. I also feel like it is intensely personal. And I was just about to say, I hope I haven't made anyone uncomfortable. See, I told you it's a journey. Anyway, yeah, no, no, I agree. I agree. Like, I feel like this has been a really long road, and I'm really grateful to be on it. And I'm, like I said, I'm grateful for the opportunity to have really had to step back and look at it and put all of the little pieces together that I've been sort of experiencing and experimenting with, I think in in the fiery furnace since COVID started.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Um, the hearing you describe this intense feeling of responsibility as one of the cornerstones of the people pleasing MO. Um, what's helping you relieve the burden of that responsibility, that sense of responsibility?
Yeah. That's a great question. I feel like it's a rejigging of where I see myself in the overall scheme of things,
Mm-hmm.
right? I think, there's a great little shot in a film called 13 Days, and it's a shot of a plaque that John F. Kennedy Jr. had on his desk, and it said, "Oh Lord, thy sea is so great and my boat is so small." And I always found that to be a really beautiful, just a beautiful image. Now it can be seen as, I'm tiny, and I don't feel like that's what it is, but I'm being held. I'm being held by something much bigger than myself. I don't need to have all the answers. What I really need most of all is to be able to trust, to really have deep faith in myself as a being, and deep faith in my my spiritual practice has definitely been a huge part of that.
Mm-hmm. So, sort of trading in the ego of I for a quieter, right-sized version of of I, like the self that is big in the sense of value, allows ego to kind of shrink and not be center stage all the time, driving you to do what you did.
Yeah, and when you have that, you also, I think, like more self-respect means more respect for others.
Yeah.
So also, like really stopping seeing people as like somehow just mere reactors to me. Really, like that's just honest. I've had to really look sometimes and think like they're actually not reacting to you at all. They're living their life. Seriously, it's just true, right? Like they're following their truth, and it may have absolutely nothing to do with how you feel about it, what you want, like nothing. They're on a different path. And good. Take yourself out of that equation. You're not in that equation, right? So, yeah.
Open the microphones. Anyone feel free to jump in if you would like with the question, because it's very honest, open revelations there about the very dynamic of people pleasing. Go ahead, Tara.
Which one? Oh, okay, it's me.
Yeah.
The confusion of two Terrys in a room is like too much for me. Thank you, first of all, Anne Marie. I mean, that took a lot of courage to have that much honesty and revealing it to people that and don't know. So that was really great. I related so well to that because I've always been a people pleaser as well, and had like an overblown sense of what I'm responsible for, which has been a real process for me to try and step back and say, it's not my problem, right? And to trust that people can take care of their own problems. And I'm very, very happy to do my little bits, but it's been really hard for me not to take over, right? So that's been a real life lesson for me. But I think I've done a pretty good job in the last 5 years anyway of learning that lesson. But it caused me a whole lot of misery for most of my life.
Yeah, I can really relate to that, Terry.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's ironic, right? People pleasing makes everyone so unhappy.
Yeah.
I should have just set out to not. Yeah, no, I won't say that. Just to not be concerned about that at all, and then who knows what would have happened.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? I wouldn't personally say that people pleasing makes them unhappy. What happens is that they become too dependent on being helped all the time, right?
Yeah.
That their own self-respect and confidence is diminished when you're always stepping in and doing everything for everybody and feeling like you have to do this, and you have to do this, and you have to do this. It's demeaning to people in some ways.
It is,
Yeah.
and I think it breeds resentment on both sides, because I think part of why it breeds resentment on both sides is that there's a lack of true love in it. It's a lack of true love and care. It's sort of a backwards way of getting your needs met, and people feel that. There's a feeling that goes with it because it's not completely true and authentic, right? You're trying to either keep something from happening or make something happen, and that's not true love. That's just right. So, yeah.
Interesting. Well, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
I have a question, Anne-Marie. You mentioned in your backstory, is it okay?
Yeah, got it. That was someone's mic. Yeah.
Okay. You mentioned in your backstory you became very good at scanning a situation and molding yourself to fit it and hiding your own feelings. And I was thinking about how valuable scanning a situation is and wondering what, that 3-step process in the past of a people pleaser, how that's different. Can you still use those skills or that capacity and transform it into something else?
Yeah, that's a great.
Oh,
sorry. Yeah, thanks, Sarah. Yeah, that's a great question. Because yes, it actually, again, it's so many good qualities when used for not so good purposes can become not so great. But the scanning and recognizing piece is something I use in my life every day in a positive way. I had a situation just last week with someone who was very, very upset and saying some very unpleasant things. And yet I could tell in the moment that he was in a lot of pain. I could see it in his eyes. It was so clear. And so that led me to react to the situation differently because I could see what was going on. And a couple of weeks ago, I walked into the office and there was something, I could just feel the energy in the office was really odd. And then it was revealed to me later on, some changes started happening. And I thought, oh, that's what I was feeling when I walked in. I could feel it. So, having that knowledge and that information doesn't have to be a burden. It's just information, right? And I don't necessarily have to act on it. And I think the big thing is, I don't have to fix it. I don't have to fix it. So I can see it and not feel like it's something that I have to change. In some cases, there's some cases where I see it and think, oh my God, I have to fix that immediately. but so there's a real positive to that. And it's a quality, a gift, I think that I've been given that I love. I'm grateful for that ability to, at times, have a deep sense of what is happening. If I'm listening to that inner voice, it's even better, right? So, yeah.
Thank you. That's great.
Anyone else with a question?
I'm intrigued, Anne-Marie.
Carol, go ahead, Carol.
Oh, sorry. How do you manage to stay so non-judgmental of yourself? That's just such a wonderful thing.
Well, you know what? I manage it. I manage it, meaning that I have to do it like all the time, and I have to remind myself all the time. And many of you will know Mara, and Mara is, I think, the original love bug in this group. And so listening to Mara talking about, some of you may have listened to her Living Library book, love, I think it's Love Your Way Through Anything. And so I've learned from her and her, like, apply love. There's a problem, there's an issue, you're feeling this, apply love. And not just to other people, but to myself. And so, like, loving the broken bits, the dark bits, the confused bits, like just really like just being like, yeah, that's okay. That's okay. And trying to say to myself some of the things that I would say to other people I love, like people on this call right now that I love, that I would say things to them and try and say those things to myself as well. Instead of the very punitive things that we often say to ourselves, right? Like, you know, we've got all the love and care in the world for others, but then, you know, have a lot of judgment for ourselves. So it is a work in progress, but when I hear myself saying something negative about myself, I try to come back to it with something loving. And again, my spiritual practice really helps with that because I feel like I'm surrounded by a lot of love. Right? Like right here, this is a very loving gathering. And that really helps.
Wonderful. Thanks, Mary.
Sharon, I think you've been attempting to say something. Give it a go.
It's kind of like that, give it a go, because I'm trying to find the words, because there really aren't a lot of words for me right now. But the commitment really comes across, Anne-Marie, that you have to that love and communication. And I think you like exude that in like 3 seconds, you know, and you hold that energy like all the time. I always feel that, like you just don't gap on it. So it's a great quality. It's a deep quality. So and I think, yeah, is there a manual somewhere? Like, did you just like get all this language figured out on your own? Because I think I'd like to be able to explain it some more, just have the terms some of them that you used, I didn't jot really hardly much down. But yeah, and people pleasing, I've just never been happy with that term for some reason. It seems to kind of demean like what I think we all see in you, which is this like wonderful, beautiful stuff. So yeah, to just kind of like take this like marker and go people pleaser, and like, man, there's so much great stuff there. So yeah, I've like totally I get it, because I definitely have struggled with a lot of that longing for stability growing up. Like, oh my God, where is the stability? You know, where is it? And that building bridges and just putting like a lot of bending over backwards that just was energy that got wasted. So anyway, that's it. That's all I guess I can say. Not bad for not having any words.
Yeah, I love that, Sharon. I too am not a fan of the people pleaser terminology, but I honestly thought it was a catchy title, and it's true. It definitely has fit, and it's funny because when I started getting ready for this, I went online and WebMD actually defines people pleaser, which I can't believe it. Like they actually have a a description of what a people pleaser actually is. But they talk about it, and they talk about how to not be a people pleaser in very, I think, almost like mundane language, like, show yourself a lot of self-care, listen to yourself. But you have to actually build that up, right? Like, what does self-care actually mean? Like, it's not taking a bubble bath. It is not that at all, although that might be a nice part of it, but it is really, truly, deeply caring for yourself. It is like saying like what you think and want, and your deepest thoughts and instincts, like they matter, and they, even if you're not going to act on them, they deserve to be heard. Like, what's going on in there, right? And that to me is self-care. Your inner voice, I mean, that can be a hard thing to find. And I don't know what my inner voice would have looked like without the meditation practice I've been following for the last number of years in this spiritual community, because that has really shaped the beauty and the clarity and depth of that inner voice. So it's interesting because it is inside of me, but it also has been touched and embellished and colored by the company of all the beautiful souls that I've met on this journey, whether they're here in front of me right now, or even people like psychologists that I've seen over the years, like for, different things. And like who encouraged me to share my views, and who said like, yeah, it's okay for you to think that. And actually in some cases who said like, it's okay for you to say that to your husband. So they really supported me saying, you know what, that's not how I experienced that at all. And I think the way you're presenting that is very unfair. And this is why, like just some of those really like kind of standing up for myself and not a forceful way or certainly not an aggressive way, in a true way. And you know what, when it's a true way, people feel the difference, even if you mess up the words and even if you mess the whole thing up. If it comes from a true place and you're saying it with a lot of love and like deep dedication to trying to make it right, it comes across. I really believe that. So anyway, I'm just keep going on and on. I'm going to mute myself again. Someone else ask a question.
Skena, I really do feel we should hear from you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, really good.
I don't have a question. I don't know really what to say. I mean, so much of what Anne-Marie said resonated because somehow, even though we just met, 16 years ago, I've had a very similar path to hers in terms of always wanting to please people. And it, I know, comes from the time I was a little kid. And for me, I guess, and Anne-Marie, I think you kind of alluded to this too, I've like realized in the last couple of years that one of the big downsides to this has been kind of an exaggerated sense of people's displeasure. So, Anne-Marie, you talked about like people are just living their lives. But, I found myself like over a period of several years, like constantly questioning myself and feeling like I'm making people unhappy, that I'm making mistakes. And really, and I think anyway, in most cases, it's not even something that the person cared about, or they've just let it slide off their back, but for me, it's taken on this like elevated importance. And so that's one of the things that I'm grappling with, which is kind of neither here nor there, but I've really enjoyed listening to this and hearing everybody's thoughts about it.
That might be a good part 2 for us.
Yeah, well,
but it does feel like one of the dynamics, doesn't it? The exaggeration of the other and whatever's going on, and somehow that sense of it being my responsibility. So, yeah, it's a perceptual warp, isn't it? It's just a perceptual warp.
Yeah.
Really, yeah. Anyone else with a question? Sarah, anything cooking in your head right now?
Well, everything that Anne-Marie said, well, not everything, but some of the key points came across when at the library. But I'm just really thinking about the resentment piece and how not only would I feel resentment by being a people pleaser, I would also worry about my resentment affecting someone else and then having their resentment come back at me. It was just like, it's that fear of, is that how you experienced it too, Henry?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's that circle, right? Yeah, the resentment, that's the part that I find the hardest, Sarah, actually, is that, in the resentment and the anger, I still have a lot of shame around that. So that's a piece that I'm still working through because, one thing I haven't talked about, I guess, but at the heart of people pleasing is just a deep insecurity, right? That's the whole idea of then following that internal compass, is that the insecurity isn't there anymore, or that, it's being replaced by something more stable. But that, deep insecurity, has led me to act in ways that have caused other people sorrow. And that's been hard. It's been hard to just admit and own that, and know that there have been times where I've acted in ways that I'm sure have been confusing and painful for others to be around. And it's in part because, resentment. There's also just an inner anger, like at yourself, at myself. Like I think I resent myself, like a child resents a parent who's constantly ignoring them, right? Like I have something to say here, and you need to pay attention to it. And every time I railroad over my thoughts and feelings, I get angrier. And then that stuff it comes out, right? It's not pleasant when it comes out, because it can unintentionally harm people who, weren't even part of the original thing. So that's where I think Mara would say for me to love myself through it, right? Like, yeah, just to love myself through it, love ourselves through the resentment. And I remember one of the lessons that I learned at the meditation center was around all the different forms of anger. And I remember saying to Judy once, I'm like, wow, I am so angry, because not only maybe I don't have the big anger all the time, but I have irritation and frustration and annoyance. And I was like, it was all this, all this resentment, all this anger that had been not getting flushed out, because it was the anger of not being heard, right?
Beautiful insight, isn't it? That you're resentful with yourself because you're not paying attention to yourself in the right way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, no one else is responsible for that, right? Even if the conditions of insecurity may be parentally connected or upbringing connected, what we do with them, as you were saying at the beginning, the coping strategies can all go many different ways with it, and that's one way to go with it. And so unpacking that and seeing, I don't have to go that way anymore. It's wonderful, gives us all hope, doesn't it, team? Gives us all hope.
Well, it's good for me to recommit in front of all these people.
Yeah, I would say, hey, you came out as a meditator in front of the mayor. I say you do everything publicly, don't you?
That's so me, right? Yes, I do everything publicly.
Don't tell anybody that you meditate except the mayor. Okay.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Really wonderful. Really, I really appreciate your sharing. I think it's been